Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to HaRav Gottlieb's articles in the back of Giving, English translation from Matan Torah. We are on Essay 7, The Nations of the World. The Holy Zohar says the following about, quote, the nations of the world. All the kindness that they do for themselves. Tikkuni Zohar, 22a, 73b. This means that whatever acts of kindness the nations of the world do toward their friends or in the service of their gods, it will never be out of love for the other, but rather due to self-love. That is, so that it'll pay off in the end. Of course, self-love here is referring to egoistic love. People want to get their heaven points, so to speak. And by doing things that equate to heaven points, surely we imagine will also be rewarded in this world as well. Who are these selfish nations of the world? The Zohar uses the expression the nations of the world to refer to the various selfish inclinations that are within each and every one of us. The Zohar is saying that our desires and thoughts, even if they move us to do acts of kindness, are based on self-love, based on our egoism. The Zohar is obviously not a political guide, but rather a guide regarding how to direct our spiritual life. As Bala Sulam stated, heaven forbid, chas v'shalom, that there is an element of nationalism in the idea that the Torah was given to Israel. Quote, only people who have taken leave of their senses could consider the possibility that God has some national preference. That is, that God prefers one nation over another. See section 5 in the Giving the Torah, Matan Torah, to learn more about that. But the notion is that the Creator is simple and beyond infinite. And it would make sense, not that we can logically deduct the logic of the Creator, but the love for His children is equal. We may see that one nation seems to prosper and have sovereignty in contrast to others that are decimated and poor, but we don't really know what's going on a spiritual level. Point being is that the quality of Yisrael, which is the inner point of giving and loving, the soul, the godly soul that's within us, that is what the Creator prefers. That is His preference, because that's His characteristic. Our godly soul, our nefesh elokis, is a chelik elokai mimah. It's a portion of God from on high, so to speak. So, of course, the Creator prefers His quality and has a preference for His quality over the opposite quality that is totally disconnected from Him, being egoism. That is the true teaching regarding the chosen people and the chosenness of Yisrael, is that more importantly it's referring to the preferred aspects that we are trying to connect to and embodying than an actual people. People do have significance as well, based on the refinement that we received in our servitude in Egypt and the spiritual genetics that we have from our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and so forth. But here we're speaking about inner work, not politics. And as far as our inner work is concerned, all these aspects are within us, meaning the aspect of Yisrael and the nations of the world, as we'll continue to learn. All the people of the nations of the world also will someday come to the service of God, no less than will the people of Israel. Everyone will have their portion, and everyone will connect relatively equally based on their levels. Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the holy Ari, the Arizal, said that all souls are derived from the single original general soul of the first Adam, the first man, Adam Harishon. Adam Harishon, according to many views, was not the first human being. Perhaps the first Homo sapiens sapien, as we understand it. Perhaps prior to that, there was a lesser version of the humanoid. But there are sources that speak about civilizations prior to the existence of Adam. In any case, what's important to connect to as a principle is that Adam is representing a godly being, being the human, that which has a godly soul, and therefore can be domele elyon, similar to the Most High, which the Baal Shem says is the language of Adam. It's from the notion of being similar to the Most High, meaning we can equate our quality of character to his. We can go from our complete egoism and transmute it and become loving, giving, and altruistic. Since each person is a miniature world, according to the Zohar, then within each human being is an aspect of Yisrael and an aspect of the nations of the world. The aspect of Yisrael, by the way, you are on 169, turning to 170 now. The aspect of Yisrael is the source of selfless giving that is in each person's heart, as well as the source of faith in the greatness of God. This gives us the spiritual strength that can make it possible to sacrifice everything in order to please God in the manner that incense is completely consumed on the altar. Meaning we can give our all if we really want to be giving and reach our highest self and our potential, and give a spirit of pleasantness, give joy to the Creator, to our fellow man, with all of our heart, all of our soul, and all of our resources. As we say in the first paragraph of Shema. The gematria of all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your resources. The numerical value in Hebrew is 737, which is the same gematria as shalhevet, flame, as opposed to Aish, fire. Shalhevet is the actual flame, it's the form of the flame, it's describing the actual movement, being the upward motion, the shape of the flame. And the Arizal says that Shalhevet is the aspect of Or Choser, returning light, meaning our kind deeds and overcoming our nations within, overcoming our egoistic desires. We want to receive some type of pleasure and we deflect it. That light that we deflect, that potential pleasure that we said, I can't receive that because I'm going to receive it egoistically. I'm going to deflect it. Or I'll only receive 10%, for example, and I'll reflect the rest of it. I can take 10% of the cake. I can eat that for God and Shabbos. 20%? No. I'll deflect the rest of it. That's called Or Choser. But Or Choser in a general concept is the giving that we do in life, the giving that we give back to the Creator by means of the deflections of desires that are not fitting for us in our correction of self, in our work of our character, and the giving to others. Or Choser is the aspect of Shalhevet because it's the upward motion. The flame goes up. The same way that incense is completely consumed on the altar, and the smoke also rises upward, also alluding to this concept. In essence, we are the sacrifice. We have to sacrifice ourselves, our time, our energy, and ideally do our utmost. Most importantly, in intention, in quality, but also in quantity. And use our strength that is God-given to inch ever so closer to him. Rabbi Baruch Shalom Ashlag interpreted the five-letter name Yisrael in Hebrew as being a conjoining of two words. The first three letters are the word Yashar, meaning straight. The last two letters make up one of the names of God, Kale. Together the meaning is straight to God, Yashar Kale. I'm not pronouncing the Kale name out of respect for the holy name, but to say the whole word, Yisrael. That is, the element of Yisrael is in all people is our desire to devote ourselves to God, so that all of our thoughts, all of our speech, and all of our actions will be in harmony with God's will. It'll be intended, in line, aligned with the Creator's will, the Creator's desire. The aspect of the nations of the world is the desire to receive pleasure and joy. This desire splits into 70 nations, where each nation represents a different variety of craving. 70 is 10 times 7, where 10 represents a complete level, as any detail of anything has a level of 10 sfirot, and 7 is the number of spiritual attributes according to the Kabbalah. 7 is the bottom 7 sfirot, which are the midot, our character attributes, the aspects of ourselves. Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut. All of them have corresponding character traits, some of them with multiple aspects that we can hone in on and reflect and try to build. So those 7 attributes times 10, because every sphira, singular for sphirot, has 10 sphirot within it. In truth, it goes on infinitely. Kabbalah is very much like quantum mechanics. Perhaps it is the true quantum mechanics. I think that's a better phrase. Havdil. Each nation represents a certain craving, and all 70 varieties of craving are the essential ingredients of the desire to receive within each of us. I think the 70 nations of the world and how they relate to our egoism is also hinted in the story of Adam Harishon in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. After the Chet, the Eitz Hadas, the sin of the tree of knowledge, it is said that prior to the sin, Adam and Eve's skin was that of light. Meaning, relative to understanding today, we can't really comprehend the type of spiritual magnitude that they existed in. Their being, their body was light, whatever that means. So their skin was or. Or is spelled Aleph, Vav, Resh. The Aleph, in any case, is a hint to the Creator himself. Alufu Shel Olam, champion of the world. Aleph is also the first letter, and he is the first of everything. He's the Creator. He precedes all, which is why some say that the Torah starts with Bereshit Bet, because obviously prior to the Torah, the giver of the Torah was the Creator. So Adam's skin was light. After the sin, when the will to receive for itself alone was fully embodied within him and conjoined with his spiritual nature, he then fell from his level to the greatest degree, completely disconnected himself, and therefore became most coarse, in contrast to the divekut, the unity that he had with the Creator in a natural, deep spiritual way. Hence his skin being akin to light. the most coarse aspect of ourselves, the most opaque, was translucent, perhaps meaning to hint to him having the quality of being similar to the Creator, Adam, Domele Elyon, similar to the Most High. So it says after the sin, his skin became this type of skin, opaque, fleshy, flesh and blood. Skin, actual skin, is also called or. It's pronounced the same way as light. The difference in spelling is that it's spelled with an ayin as opposed to an aleph. It's ayin vav resh. That ayin in gematria is 70. So by means of absorbing the ultimate egoism within himself, he essentially swapped the expression of his oneness with the Creator, which was the aleph, and it got replaced with an ayin. As opposed to being one with the Creator, he absorbed the 70 nations of the world, the aspect of the 70 nations, which is the will to receive for itself alone, the Rotzon Kabbalah, Almanat Kabbalah, hence becoming opaque and becoming real skin, fleshy skin. Alrighty, to continue. In the material world, Israel's population and geographical territory are small, and it is surrounded by the nations of the world like a small lamb among 70 wolves. This is a physical manifestation of a spiritual reality, that the aspect within each of us that identifies with the divine will is small and undeveloped, in contrast to the 70 forms of desire that wish to dominate our thoughts, feelings, and actions. A person must give much effort in Torah and the mitzvot in order to extricate the aspect of Yisrael, straight to God, from darkness to light. We must recognize its value and significance, and we must recognize the contamination and dirt and the other desires and thoughts that exist within us, that come from the myriad forms of desire. When we fully appreciate this, we can awaken ourselves to strengthen the aspect of Yisrael within us, so that it will gradually overcome the aspect of the 70 nations of the world. Key point, it seems here, is the awareness of self and the awareness of our egoism, which is given to us by means of the light of the Torah. Or Torah, the light within the Torah, when we learn and when we do mitzvot with the intention to absorb the light within it in order to come to a state of desiring to give, to come to a state of imuna shlema, perfect faith, then we draw that reality upon ourselves. But the bitter truth is that the light that shines within us shines and illuminates the 70 nations within. Oh, I got this nation here, this nation there, so to speak. I have these aspects within which I need to correct. And that is what the light does for us. By means of that awareness and the pain of contemplating the highest version of ourselves, our highest potential of being one with the Creator, being in Devekut, cleaving to God, in contrast to where we are holding, to where we are, being complete egoists. And the reality of our complete egoism revealing to us, slowly but surely over time in our inner work. So by means of that pain creates a vessel. And that vessel is a means to be filled with the aspects, slowly but surely, of the revelation of the Yisrael within, the revelation of the soul. There's a well-known story of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, in which he was standing in synagogue, wrapped in his prayer shawl, and preparing to lead the prayers for the congregation. Everyone could see that he was debating with himself and hesitating for some time. At one point, he put down the prayer shawl on the stand and shouted, "Okay, you can pray." naturally. No one there understood what was going on. Then the Rebbe explained, when I stood up to pray, I looked within myself and I saw that my evil inclination, my egoism, was also there with me. I asked him, "What are you doing here?" He answered, "I want to pray too. I get a lot of pleasure and joy from performing mitzvot and saying prayers. It makes me feel righteous and complete. So I want to pray with you." I got very angry and I said to the evil inclination, "I'm not willing to pray with you." He insisted and wouldn't leave me alone. So I got even angrier and I told him, "Okay, you can pray if you want to. I'm not going to pray with you." This reminds me, Shalom Shalom, Julius Caesar. This reminds me of IFS, Internal Family Systems. I had a Rebbe in Yeshiva who would practice this psychological method with some of us. Of course, if we were willing, sometimes not, maybe. In essence, one gets into a relaxed state, does a quick meditation, some deep breathing, and they're allowed to jump right into their subconscious and speak to different aspects of themselves. For example, one can speak to any aspect of themselves. You can speak to your 8-year-old self, your 5-year-old self, any age that you've had, and perhaps even the future ages that you have yet to come to. Or you can speak to your business self. You can speak to your father's self, your son's self. The infinite aspects that we express. Anything that it is, we can speak to that and actually dialogue with it on a subconscious level. And it's very illuminating. It seemingly has some positive feedback from the actual realm of psychology and therapy. But this reminds me of that. In his great meditative state, in his great spiritual level, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev was able to tap in, look inside, and see that aspect of his ego, and dialogue with his ego. And our sages and spiritual masters speak about the power of speech. So for him to actually put out into words, it's one thing to think it in the mind, and according to quantum consciousness, release the information by means of the electrical signals. It's another thing to feel it in our heart and actually release that information magnetically into the quantum field, into the unified field. But to make that head and heart connection and speak it out with intention, speech is arguably the most powerful influence to draw a reality, to change a reality, to influence. So in this case, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev wanted to speak down and be angry with the aspect of his ego in order to subjugate it, put it down in order that he can better reveal the altruism and the love and the giving within and pray with pure intention. I'm just meaning to describe the synchronicity between aspects of the sciences today, in this case psychology, and how the masters of spirituality were well in tune to what is only slowly but surely here and there being revealed in the realms of humanities and science. From this story, we learn that even when we keep all the Torah and mitzvot at the lofty level of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, we still have within us two aspects. The aspect of Yisrael and the aspect of the nations of the world. The aspect of Yisrael is the altruism within each and every human being. The aspect of the nations of the world is the egoism within. It takes a lot of work and effort in order to learn how to distinguish between these two inner voices. There can never be a situation when both are on top. And we must make sure that it is always the side of Yisrael that dominates. As our sages said, quote, Masechet Shabbat 56b, the city of Tzur was built only from the destruction of Jerusalem. And they were referring to the tzur within us. That is the aspect of the nations of the world. The nations within us are built only from the destruction of holiness. Holiness, of course, is defined as something separate, unique, and distinct in relation to our character and our correction of our aspects. The holy aspect is giving and altruism. That's unique and distinct in contrast to our egoism, which is much more often than not the ruling power. The opposite is also true. Holiness is built only when we recognize the undesirable and evil nature of the 70 nations within us. We must subjugate them and bring them lower and lower. By keeping Torah and the mitzvot with this intention, we can gradually extricate ourselves from the control of the self-love, the egoistic love that nature has imprinted within us, and eventually acquire a second nature, of loving the other. I think to imagine this in regards to the physical world and drawing this, comparing it to the spiritual work that we're in, as we are to subjugate the nations within more and more and more, almost to the point of completely starving them and essentially killing them. Not completely, but essentially so that we can extricate Israel. That the aspect of Yisrael within, the aspect of altruism and being intended to please God in all of our thought, speech, and action, will be revealed and will be in control. From there, meaning if we also do that on a material level, as a nation, as a Jewish people, and we can be a light onto the nations, we can be a Goy Kadosh, a holy nation, then we can be the example for the world. We can say, hey, the world's in chaos and everyone's egoistic and killing each other and stealing from each other. And we have built a society that is more or less perfected. We did it by means of the system of Torah and mitzvot through the lens of the innermost dimension of the Torah and Kabbalah. That's essentially the goal. That is what we are aiming towards. That's what we're heading towards, whether through suffering or through the actual work in the Torah and the mitzvot, in the path of the Torah, the path of light. We're getting there no matter what. Depends how fast we want to get there and through what means. So once we can get to that aspect of truly becoming holy and unified, then we can be a light unto the nations. Of course, assuming they're already subjugated and down, we can revive them and then bring them into Israel, meaning the nations will convert and become a part of the unified whole that is humanity. Humanity is supposed to be Israel because all of humanity will and is supposed to reach the highest state of spiritual consciousness, which is described as selflessness and altruism and being Yashar Kale, straight to God. Amazing. Seth Hashem should be able to slowly but surely inch towards this reality. The next essay is how it feels to begin to give selflessly. Till next time, all the best. Shabbat Shalom.